Hi everyone, thanks for joining me in the beauty garden today. We're going to go through the blushing beauty and bronze goddess tutorial. So I'm going to start with how to apply cream blush, then set your makeup with a translucent powder, and then we're going to apply the powder blush, and the powder bronzers to get that really beautiful sun-kissed look and a rosy cheek glow so that you have a really healthy complexion that doesn't look overdone. With bronzer and blush, it all depends on your face shape. So if you can wear a little bit more blush or bronzer, feel free to do that. But I do recommend that you go slowly to start and then build your color so that it doesn't look overdone at all. And this tutorial will actually take about 30 minutes because I do go through everything step by step. But when you're doing it at home, it won't take you more than 5 minutes in the mornings. The basic rule for applying blush is that if you're going to use a cream blush, you need to apply cream on cream or liquids on liquids, and then you set your makeup with powder, and then you can apply other powders. That's why if you were to put powder on your face and then try and apply some sort of a liquid or a cream blush or bronzing product, you might find that you get that patchiness, and that's because those two products don't work well together. They don't allow the other to slide on evenly. So what we'd like to do is we make sure that we put cream on cream and powder on powder. For that purpose, once I've finished with my complexion and I'm happy with my overall tone of my skin and I'm concealed nicely, and we will revisit the concealing at the end to make sure that we've covered all the dark circles, I like to apply a cream blush and then set it with some powder and then apply a powder blush, and I find that's the only way to make blush last the whole day. I haven't found any other way. So if you know of another way, please let me know. But this one works for me and seems to work for most of the people that I work with. So I really advocate using lipsticks as cream blushes. Why not? They're cheap. They do the same job as a cream blush product. The other product you can use is a Becca lip tint or any kind of tint. Benefit make a nice one, but I do find with that Benefit tint, which is very liquidy, you do need to do one cheek first, buff it in properly, and then do the other cheek rather than trying to even them out, because one will set and the other one you'll be working with, and then you'll have a little defined ring right here that you can't, blend for the life of you. So I'm going to demonstrate doing it with a cream blush. In this case, I'm going to use a lipstick. And the palette that I've got is a Smashbox palette. They're great because you can actually, they've got so many different colors. I'll just show you, and they're all really beautiful natural tones. I don't think I have one that hasn't looked good, which is funny because I don't really like lipstick that much. But when I'm choosing the lipstick to use for my blush, it's important that I choose something that I would use on my lips that mimics the natural color of my lips, because the idea of blush is being that you look like you've got a natural flush, maybe you've gone for a run, and it's just supposed to look healthy. If you want to add more color later on, feel free to do that, and if you can wear blush, and some people love blush, by all means go for it. But when you're doing just this natural sort of the first step, we just want it to look quite flushed. So I'm going to choose this tone here. See that one here, which is quite a sort of a dusty pink tone, and the brush that I'm using is my favorite brush ever. It's a Stila brush. It's number 24 and it's a double-ended, and the perfection of this brush is that this little flat baby brush here works because it is supposed to be the perfect size for the apples of your cheeks. So when we do our blush, we bear in mind that when you flush naturally, very few people flush up into their cheekbones, which is why we want it to be a natural looking placement. Traditionally, people say to apply blush to the apples of your cheeks. I like to even go down a little bit. Next time you go for a run or do any exercise, just see where you flush naturally, and that will give you a good indication. With bronzer, which we'll go into in a second, I will show you how we're going to then contour and make it all work together so that you just look sun-kissed. So with that color that I've got, and the trick with this is to go slowly and you can build it up. And just also remember that whatever you put on your face is likely to settle in the first couple of minutes. So I'm just going to dab it on the apple of my cheek. Make sure that you've got even color there, maybe a little bit more. And this brush, if you don't have this brush, it's fine, just use your finger. I like to use my middle finger because you get a good blending action. But if you do have a brush like mine, you just want to stipple it out. And by that I mean you just sort of dotting in the general area. Now, at this point, I look like a bit of a clown. That's a better, okay. So this is where I can use my fingers, and I just want to lightly tap it into my skin where I would naturally flush, so not too high up, moving gently up into the cheekbone. Remember, when you set it with your powder, that's actually going to dull the color a little bit too. So at the moment it does look quite bright, but I'm definitely going to tone that down a little bit. So I'm going to let that sit for a second. This brush we'll also use again later when I apply my bronzer. And then the final step is we want to make sure that we have, first of all, checked all of the creases on our face, so anything under the eye. Smooth it out with the same brush that you used last time. On the eyelid, very, very important, because I can see now already that my my lids have started to crease, and that's because the eyes have, your eyelids are naturally very oily, and so we use a different primer for them when we're doing our eye makeup. And then what you need to get is your perfect translucent powder. So there's a little bit of confusion sometimes about what a translucent powder should look like. Does it have color? What kind of translucent powder? You know, don't want my face to look really powdered. My answer to all of those is you need to find something that is very finely milled. So that means that the particles are really, really tiny. I like the Becca range. I know I've showed you a lot of Becca on this, and mostly because the philosophy of Becca is a very youthful complexion that doesn't look like it's wearing any makeup, just has perfect skin. So with Becca, their powder is extremely finely milled. Don't know if that's going to show you any difference, but what I like to do is get myself a really beautiful soft brush. This is an Eco Tools blush brush, powder brush, and I think this one's probably about $15 if I'm not mistaken. And I tap my translucent powder into the lid, and then I swirl my brush in the lid to a point where you can hardly see any powder. If I've got any excess, I'll just tap it off, but we want it to almost be as though there's nothing on the brush. That's how you know that you don't have too much on your brush. And then when I apply it, I'm going to press it very gently into the sections of my face where I know that the makeup is likely to move or transfer. Because it's quite humid, I'm going to apply it all over my face. Also because when I'm using my mobile phone, I don't like my makeup to transfer off onto my phone. And wherever you might find that you get maybe a little bit of perspiration during the day, or maybe you just prefer to have a bit of a matte finish, you can just add more. And the beauty of this particular brand of powder is that what it does is when it goes on, it does look a little bit more matte, but within half an hour it will warm up to your skin and you'll get that beautiful dewy complexion again. As you can see, I'm just kind of pressing it in. I'm not really, and you can dust off any excess as well. And the cheeks that I put on, you can hardly see that color now. I mean, it just looks like it's a bit of a flush through my cheeks. So I'll just add to that a little bit later when I put my blush on. It's also important that you do dust that translucent powder over the top of your eye, and that you have smoothed out any creases before you do that. Okay, so that's pretty much the makeup, the base set. Now we're going to look at how we're going to do blush and bronzer, and I'll show you that in just a sec. Okay, so applying our powder blush and our powder bronzer, this is only to be done after you've set your makeup with that translucent powder. And I just realized that when I was talking about the translucent powder, we didn't discuss color. So translucent powder can be given a name depending on the brand. I know that the Chanel one is just called a translucent powder or a microcrystal powder. With the Becca brand that I just showed you, that color, which is the translucent, is actually called Eggshell, but they do mineral powders in a variety of different colors. It's important to remember that if you choose to put a colored powder over the top of a foundation, you're actually going to be adding color to your face. So that's why a translucent powder is so great, is because basically it sets the makeup, but you're not adding any further color to your face. So very important. When it comes to applying bronzer and blush, I like to apply the bronzer first and then apply the blush. The main reason for this is that the bronzer is supposed to give you a nice sun-kissed look. So wherever the sun hits your face naturally is where bronzer should go. I'm not really of the mindset that bronzer should be applied in a sweeping motion and furiously all over your face, because I just don't think that's a very flattering look, number one. And also, we've already matched our face tone according to the rest of our body. To apply more color is actually going to make your face darker than the rest of your body, and that can be quite aging, and there's nothing worse than seeing, you know, over bronzed look. It's probably the one product I see most overused and misused, I would say. Whenever I have clients who have spray tans, I ask them to go quite lightly on their face, because what we want to do is make sure that we're matching the overall skin tone. And also, a lot of bronzers and fake tans do have an orange undertone, so you do need then a sort of a green based foundation to counteract that, so it can become a little bit tricky. And I like to use a mineral makeup sometimes because, for one thing, it's good for your skin. When you set the makeup right at the end, it does set nicely into the skin. They don't tend to be too orange, and you can buff it on a little bit more. And then the other bronzer that I'm going to use, and I do tend to use maybe more than one, is a MAC Mineralize. MAC do great pigments. Anything that's a, you know, an eyeshadow or a blush, or an eye pencil is amazing in MAC. But you can't go wrong with their powders. This is medium dark. Next time I get it, I'll probably get the dark, because I find that this one's actually even a little bit light for me. So back to our great brush that we had before. The reason I love this brush primarily is because it's tapered and it's thin. So what does that mean? It means that when I'm creating the 3, because that's how I believe you should apply a blush, the bronzer, sorry, the point of a bronzer is to create a sun-kissed tone, to give a little bit of contouring through the cheekbones. And generally speaking, it's not meant to be applied all over the face, as I said before. So this particular brush is perfect for getting into that, into the line, allowing that little bit of shading, and I'm going to show you how we do that. So what we want to do is go with your darker color first. And I'm going to, again, it's just got a little bit in the lid, and that's all you need, and that's also a great reason why we like a mineral foundation for this. But you do need to make sure that you are using a color that's probably 2 or 3 shades darker than you normally would, because the purpose of this is to make you look a bit bronzed. And I'm going to really buff that into the brush, again, just tapping off any excess. And then when I'm applying it, what I want to do is I usually start here, but the idea is to create a 3. And the reason we create the 3 is because this is the places that we want to create shade. We talked about highlighting before, and this is where we want to actually create some shade. So let me just grab this mirror because it's a better angle, and to show you. I like to start in this section here because I know that that's where I want my cheekbone to be accentuated, by creating a darker shade underneath that's going to lift the cheekbone on the top. So remember, before we applied the concealer and that highlighted that section, now what we're doing is we're actually going to shade underneath the cheekbone, which creates a bit of a step. So even when you can see now from the beginning, it's not very prominent, but I have a little bit of a pronounced cheekbone there now. You can see the difference in color there. So what I want to do, and again I've gone very gently, is using my mineral makeup we're just creating a number 3, and I am going a little bit onto the cheekbone, and then I'm going onto my jawline here. So the idea is that I'm highlighting up the top of my cheekbone and my jawline, and I'm touching the face with the bronzer where the sun would naturally touch the face. Okay, so you can see that, and it's quite subtle as well. I'm going to do the other side, make sure that I'm nice and even. So again, starting, and the line that I'm looking for is from the inner ear through to my mouth. That's the line that you should follow. And go gently, and you can always build more. It's important that we're placing it underneath the cheekbone and not on the top, because otherwise you're sort of undoing all the highlighting work that you did before. So number 3, and under here. This is great also if you are someone who has concerns about maybe a sagging jawline or a little bit more flesh under here. That's how you can actually create that nice defined jawline, is to go with your bronzer or your contouring product. And just remember, you can pop it across, you know, your forehead a little bit, but we want it to be natural looking, and that's why it's nice using a mineral foundation as well, and the powder version. If you are going to try doing this with the cream-based product, just make sure that you do it after you've applied, or before you've applied your cream blush, and before you set it with the translucent powder. So I'm also going to do a little bit on the top of the nose, because when I tan, I usually do tend to tan a little bit through the top here. Yep. So now just looking a little bit bronzed, but I haven't gone over the top, and you know, it's just to match my overall skin tone. So my face is not looking much darker than the rest of my body, and that's what we want. So that was just that first color. If I want to create a little bit more dimension, I would go with something, might even be a little bit darker than this, because the idea is that we want to create that little bit more of a step through here. So I've got this amazing quad that's also a Jane Iredale. It's called the Sunbeam Bronzer. The idea is that with these two colors, you mix them together to create your perfect bronze, and this is probably where I'd create that step, and this is probably where I'd create more of the sun-kissed look. And then on the apple of the cheek is this beautiful sort of a highlighter color and a pretty sort of dusty pink, which are both a pearl finish, and that will again give me a bit more of a glow. But because I've used a luminizing foundation, I probably don't want to add too much more sparkle. I'm just going to apply a little bit of the darker brown. Again, I'm going to tap that off to my cheeks in here, just to get that nice little bit of contouring, and I'll go really, really gently with this because it's quite dark. You don't want it to be obvious, but you can see it there. Okay. Bit more difficult on this side because of the light. Right. And then finally, this is where we would apply our powder blush. So again, we just want to be extremely cautious when we apply it. You don't need to go too heavy on blush. The choice of color is really up to you. I recommend again something that mimics a natural glow, but at the same time, if you're a person who can wear a bright fuchsia or a bright orange, sometimes that color actually you don't think it will work and it looks amazing. I'm going to show you if I can. Yep, what a bright orange looks like. Because on a darker complexion it can look quite flattering. If you're more fair toned, or just during summer, if you want to experiment, you know, why not? But just remember, this is a Napoleon eyeshadow, by the way, because blush and eyeshadows are really essentially the same thing. The pigments, you know, just make sure you've got a nice good pigment, something that's going to stay on the skin, and make sure that you tap it off really well. There's nothing worse than loading your brush with too much blush and there's no going back. You can try and dull it down with your translucent powder again, but I'd prefer to go softly, softly, and then see how I go. So again, I'm just going to take it really slowly. I like to dust it on so I can see how I'm going, and then I can always build it up. Bearing in mind that I've got a bright orange, so I'll do one side and then I'll do the other side because I want to make sure that I don't have more on one side than on the other. Again, I've just dusted that off. And I like to kind of fan it out, tapping it and sort of spreading it and see how I go. I don't like to work blush in too high or too furiously because I just personally don't think that it suits me, but also because I like to have that feathered look. If you are able to wear blush heavily, go for it. Okay. So that's the bright orange, and not as scary as you might think. That's a Napoleon eye color, but you can choose. MAC's got some really great blushes at the moment. If you can find them online, you can get them for about $20 Australian, which is great. So that's bronzing and blushing all done. If you want to apply more, feel free, but I mean the overall look is just supposed to be a nice glowing sun-kissed look, and because we're going for quite a neutral eye, we're just keeping it really simple for this one.